Gary.
Okay. So obviously I'm not sure who's here and who's met me before, but if you haven't, I'm Gary Hurdman. I look after sort of software development in the digital space, reporting to Henry Griffiths. One of the our big growth areas at the moment in terms of software development is process automation and robotic process automation. So I'll share my screen and we'll kick straight off.
Thank you. And like I said, if anybody's got any questions, either raise your hand, switch on your camera, ask the question directly, or pop it into the chat. We'd be happy to read that out for you as well.
Okay, let's just turn my camera off so I don't distract myself. I've got to look at a different screen. You'll see the side of my head. You see, that's the problem. I'll be looking at a different screen. So I'll zoom straight into it. RPA. What is it and what does it stand for? Right. So RPA, if you don't know, it's Robotic Process Automation. And I don't think we should really think of them as robots, but more as members of our team. So I'll put a little comment there. It's not a robot. Well, it is, but don't think of them that way. They really are just a member of the team that we like to give all the boring work to do, so we can do things that are a lot more interesting. And that is it. I don't really want to make this a technical conversation. I don't know what what sort of what our audience is, whether we're all very technical or all coming from the business. And I really want to aim this at everybody in the same way, and just think about it from a practical, from a business perspective, about what they can do for us and our teams. Let's have a quick discussion about the benefits of RPA and robotic process automation. So robots I'm going to say this again, they increase the size of your teams. So if we've got work that is really boring, that nobody likes doing, is repetitive, takes up a lot of time, well, we should be giving that to a robot to do, and then we can go away and do the really interesting stuff that adds proper value and is more satisfying to do from a human perspective. So I think one of the things that we're all suffering with at the moment is we don't have enough people for our work. So if we give those boring jobs to a robot, we can stay on top of that, to help us stay on top of the other work we do. Another advantage is robots, because when we start to look at process automation, we start to really put it into a bit of a process review. And it helps us identify the processes that perhaps need some improvement, and we make that part of the automation, because what we don't want to do is automate a poor process. It's still a poor process, even if it's automated, and at some point poor processes tend to be a bit flaky, and it will still catch us out. So that's another benefit. Robots don't make as many mistakes as I do, certainly. Us as people, we're fallible. We make typos. I make a lot. If you've ever had an email off me, you know that I make a lot of them. And robots are consistent. If they do it right once, they do it a lot of times. I've just seen that pop up. Yeah, I'm quite happy to share these slides at the end. So they make fewer costly mistakes. One of the disadvantages of RPA and robotics is that as yet I've not trained them to make the tea. So as soon as we can, we'll get onto that. So that's kind of an overview. I'll talk a little bit later about what makes a good process for automation as an automation candidate, but we'll just talk through a couple that we've already delivered. We have quite a few in delivery now. I think there's been about 19 being delivered all told. There's I think it's 11 or 12 that are run regularly, and there's a few that run annually, and there's some that will never run again, and I'll explain why in a short while. It's basically because they've done their job, and it's time for them to retire. So these are four processes that we either automated in total or tasks within it, and I'll just talk you through those. So EDAX, this is in revenues. I think there's a couple of places where we can also look at this. But EDAX is the name of the report that comes from BAX. I'm sorry, I missed that question. Feel free to shout them out if they're coming in the text. I missed them. I will come back to it though. And from BAX, where as a council we have some direct debits that might be bounced back to us for non-payment, and there may be several reasons for this. It could be that there was insufficient funds within the account, or the account was the direct debit was cancelled. And based on the report that comes back, we look up the citizen. Say we, it was somebody who used to do this. They look up the system in one of the citizen in one of the systems, and they take an action. So if it was insufficient funds, we might press a button to represent that direct debit in a few days' time, or if it's been cancelled, we might set up an alternative payment method. That as a council, we're large. We have a lot of direct debits, and as such, we get a lot of these come back in the report. And it was taking somebody a significant part of their day to do that, but not anymore. So we've automated that process now, which has freed that person up to go and do other things. So from a team perspective, they're saving several hours a day. They've got more capacity. They can use their people to add some value. The robot runs a lot quicker than people, so we only run it 3 times a week now rather than every day. And clearly, it's cheaper to run, but in the grand scheme of things, that's the least of the benefits, if you like. So that's the EDAX report, and feel free to jump in if you've got any questions. And I hope you like my little robot. It looked really blank on that side of the page. Terrible PowerPoint skills. Anyway, so benefits, rent increases. We run this annually. It's just going through. I think we've just completed it, and all my developers are on a course at the moment, which is I was hoping to bring one with me, but they're doing some training, and I can talk more about that later because it's about the future. And rent increases runs every year. It's spreadsheets submitted by landlords across the council that provide provide housing for our citizens. And every year they're allowed to put their rents up, and if they do, that comes in via a spreadsheet, and somebody would take that spreadsheet and again go look up the data, look up that account in one of our systems and make some adjustments. Again, we no longer do that. We have a robot do that for us. The advantage in this case, and I'll move on to the next slide, is that if a mistake is made and people are charged the wrong amount, maybe too much or not enough, it becomes very costly to unpick that. So quality is perhaps the driver in this rather than any other benefit. We want to make sure we get the data right consistently, and robots help us do that. There is some time saved in manual entry while the robot's doing it. The robot runs, I think, in terms of hours, it's probably only about 48 hours in total or something like that, but that's equivalent to several weeks of manual entry. So that's rent increases. There's a couple of reasons I put this into like a case study. One of them is this isn't what we call an attended robot. It's slightly different to our other robots, which live on a server and are scheduled. So we time that within. We give the robots a time to go and do something, whereas an attended robot can be triggered by a person, and so the person would kick off the process. And with track and trace, we had to do that because one of the systems it was interfacing with was CTAS, and that had multi-factor authentication. So it was linked to a person. That person had to log in. They get a code on their mobile. I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. And then they'd log in, and the robot didn't have access to their mobile, clearly. So what we had to do was set a robot in such a way that somebody could log in, do that initial login piece of a few minutes, and then press a button for the robot to go and do the real work. The real work in this case was to refer COVID cases back to public health for tracing. This was something that during the peak was taking some of our people, I think some of them were agency workers, and they were working up, through the day and up until sort of midnight, 1 o'clock on occasion to get these cases referred back. They had to be done. They couldn't be left to the next day. They had to be done, because otherwise there's no point in tracing them if they, several days later, if they're actually haven't got COVID anymore. So this was taking the teams that were doing this were really feeling the pain. Came as an urgent request. I think Neil took about 2 days to develop this one. It didn't take him very long at all. There were a couple of issues, as I say, or challenges. One was the multi-factor authentication. Another was we didn't have a non-production system of CTAS to develop against. So we developed against the production system I say at risk, but there was nothing that the robot could have done that couldn't have undone it had we made a mistake. Good news is we didn't, and that was another successful implementation. So the Eclipse migration is something that adults and children have. Children services were moved to Eclipse a couple of years ago, but as adults just moved across, children's also had a period of downtime where they couldn't use Eclipse. During that downtime, both adults and children's were progressing the cases of our vulnerable citizens and building up notes and data that had to go into Eclipse. Our vendor was unable to upload that data for us as a Delta. They were able to migrate the historic Delta quite fine, but it was a challenge for them to upload the Delta. And the only other option at that point then, there was no other extract, load, transform option that we could use, and there was no applications for it. So the only other option was manual entry. When we're talking about data that's supporting our vulnerable citizens, we want to make that available to our social workers really quickly. And that's an estimate of 40,000 rows, and I think it was a bit more than that, and 40,000 updates. It was going to take weeks for people to get that in. So we developed robots. I think there was about 8 in total for the different tasks of data upload, and these worked over days rather than weeks. We did run a few robots together, in parallel to bring that down. And when I say days, I really am talking hours for some of this. It's days for all of them to run. So we made that data available. It helps us protect our vulnerable citizens, and I think that was the biggest benefit in this. In terms of people doing it with the development, it was actually quicker to put a developer on it. The developer developed the robots quicker than we could have put the data in. So in the grand scheme of things, it was all a bit of a no-brainer, and a great success as it turned out. So that's sort of what we've done. And thinking forwards, and for you guys out in your teams, you might want to think about how RPA might be able to help you. I just wanted to talk about how you might identify processes that you're currently doing or tasks that you think would benefit from automation. And this slide just goes through that. There's 7 really factors that we consider when we're looking at automation, and you can see those on the screen in front of you. Frequency, complexity, volume, data quality, data format, process maturity, and the impact of errors. And I've talked about some of those factors as we're talking about some of our case studies. But just to very quickly go through those, if we've got a process that we do every day and it takes us 1 minute per iteration, and we've got 200 of those iterations, then that's going to take 200 minutes. I kept that nice and easy for myself to work out. But that's going to take 200 minutes. Could be a good couple of hours. So that would suggest that if we could automate that we'd save a significant amount of time in our day to go and do the more interesting stuff. So the more the more frequent and the more volumes there are within a process, the more iterations, the the greater the benefit of automating it. When it comes to complexity, simple versus complex, the simple ones are really quick to automate. Complex, we should still be automating those, but we might consider how we do that and how we look at the process before we automate it, and how we think about process improvement. But generally speaking, the more simple something is, the quicker it is for us to develop, and the quicker you guys will see the benefits of that. Volume, I've really covered that actually when I was talking about frequency, but yeah, the more versus less. So if there's a great number of iterations of the same process, the more we do it, the more we might want to think about our process as an automation opportunity. So data quality, that's important, and that going back to a couple of those case studies where it was, if data quality is really important, robots don't make mistakes. If they do, they do it all the time, but we catch that in testing. Before anything goes into production, before we let a robot loose on a live system, we're sure, to within a reasonable sort of amount of confidence that it's going to be working well for us. So data quality generally is improved by RPA. Data format, and this is talking about the sort of data we get in. So if that data is structured, it comes in on a form with lots of drop downs, lots of radio buttons, and the data's consistent in how it looks each time, it's easier to automate. More unstructured data that might be free text, then I'm not saying we can't automate it. If all we're doing is copying and pasting it, we can definitely automate it. But the more unstructured it is, the data is, the more difficult it is to path that process if we need to make a decision on that data. But as part of process improvement, we can look at how we can do that. So if the process starts with a web form, and the web form has a free text field, and we can change it to a drop-down list, then that would make part of that process. Process maturity. I think this is misleading actually. I think this should say process stability, because process, and that's what it's about. Process maturity, the bedded in processes that we've been doing for a long time, they tend to be more stable. We've ironed out the kinks. But a well-designed new process, to be fair, is just as viable for automation. And the impact of processing errors, again, mentioned this one previously, but yeah, if because data quality is better guaranteed, if there's an impact that's costly or could damage us reputationally, then we should, again, if we can consider using RPA to automate that bit of that task or that process, then we should. It's one less thing to worry about.
Gary, just a really quick question. So in terms of, you talk about data quality, how is it that you ensure the quality is up to scratch, and do you use some sort of like data cleansing process?
No. So when I'm talking about data quality, I'm talking about the impact of quality through human error, really. So the data, it's the age-old thing of garbage in, garbage out, isn't it? So we're not, as automation specialists, we're not really talking about cleansing what's already there, but what we have got, we know we can deal with robustly. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about quality, it's going back to that rent increases process, where if somebody accidentally types in the wrong figure, that can cause problems downstream. The robot will never type in the wrong figure. If the data coming in is good, the data going out will definitely be good. It's really about guaranteeing the process rather than the data, if you like. Mm-hmm. And I want to say the process against mistakes, and I am talking human errors. We're people, we're fallible, and as I say, I make plenty of them. I make plenty of mistakes, and anybody who's had an email off me will attest to that fact. So that's what we're talking about. If the human part of that process could give us a problem through, even copying and pasting. If somebody's doing the same thing time and time again from a spreadsheet, copying and pasting and putting it into one of our systems, and we have lots of those processes about, just missing the last digit, for instance, when they do the copy and paste. It's easily done, and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That helps us guarantee our quality.
Okay, brilliant. We've just got a hand raised. Bhupendra, do you want to come in?
Hi, Gary. I thought you might need a heckler.
Yeah, you can jump in.
So that's my job. They hide me for that, especially. No, but thank you. It's very informative. We work together anyway, from time to time. Just a couple of questions and thoughts on the Eclipse migration example. So in between, while the system was unavailable to end users, you said that the deltas, the information that they would have ordinarily put into the system, how did they record that? Was it like a shared spreadsheet or with certain fields? Or
no, so what they had is they took a baseline of the original system of Care First. There was two options for this that we both used. Excuse me. And what the social workers did is they carried on once the extract and the baseline had been taken from the database of Care First, they carried on using it. And what we did at the end was take an export of that data. And it did come to us in spreadsheets. You're right. But it was an export of data, so people weren't working from spreadsheets.
Okay, good. So they carry on using the old system post the data migration export.
That's exactly right.
That's interesting. So I guess there was, the clever stuff, that we don't always see on this is to devise the processes to actually extract information, like here, what data, what fields you need to look at. Did you look at the back end, I guess, or?
We didn't. We didn't personally, and we don't drive that. It sort of the information that people need, and then and generally speaking, these processes are, we use RPA for existing sort of bedded in processes. It's unusual for us to use RPA for things like a migration because it's not the most suitable technology. There are better things to get to get information into a database. However, we'd got no option. And our option at that point was then, do we spend weeks of human activity, or do we, and with potential mistakes happening, it'd be easy for somebody to upload the wrong notes into the wrong record.
Okay.
That sort of thing is a human thing to do. So we was able to get it done quickly and better ensure the quality of that data when it's in the end of that system.
Okay, so your robot read the spreadsheet format information and then inputted it into the new system.
That's exactly it. Exactly as a person would. So it's using the same interfaces, and this is why I say we shouldn't think of RPA as a robot. We really should think of them as a junior member of our team that's happy to do the things we don't want to do.
I see. So that was through the front end, sort of the end user application. Perfect. Okay.
Exactly. It didn't need any special software, any APIs or anything like that. It just used what a user would use. And we treat our robots as users. So if they need access to a system, we raise a SLAM for them.
Cool. That's good. I've got a second question, just mindful that other people may have as well. Just quickly. So, and I guess, that there are applications that do things like this. I've tried to sort of get one working, but I just wondered, so your robot could, let's say, view an inbox of an email, and if it sees an urgent email that requires a call out of a resource, a technical resource overnight, out of hours, so could a robot, have you tried that, to actually look for that urgent email and then, based on that, tap in a few digits to call, make an audio call to a person that is actually on call? Could that be? Is that possible? Is that something?
I'm sure it is. I would suggest that that it might be possible, but I would suggest that isn't how we'd use one, because as I said, what we do with the unattended robots is that they They are scheduled, so
Yeah.
you might be running that once a day, every hour, whatever that schedule is.
Yeah.
So it's not triggered. So it doesn't sound like a good use case for it.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But
Okay.
it's something we could explore, and then and RPA sometimes does feel like the last resort we should be using. You know, we should explore more appropriate technologies before we get there, and there might be something in Outlook we could use.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's good. We'll catch up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Bhupendra. Gary, you've got another hand raised, actually. You've got Philip. Philip, do you want to?
Hi there. Yeah, hi, Gary. I've worked with Gary for quite a while now on some projects with adults and communities, and anyone that's on the call, if they have got any ideas after Gary's presentation, then give myself a shout, or Gary himself, obviously, and I can push that forward. I just wondered if Gary was able to answer the impossible question of what are the cost savings? I know there's a development cost, but I know we've had discussions before about what a robot costs per year, and the fraction of what it takes to do a process sort of thing. Are you able to give people a ballpark figure of the sort of savings?
I could. I don't know whether I will, because I think that the thing for me is not that we save money, it's that we use our people better. What I'm trying to do with robotics is increase the size of the teams. I want to give you an extra member of the team, a digital one, a robot, but it's an extra member nonetheless. But yeah, that extra member will be cheap. Now, I mean, it costs. Don't quote me on this. You know, do not put this into a business case, because it's very, very loose. But a robot costs us about £15,000 a year to run, somewhere in that region. But it does the equivalent work of 9 people. They run 24/7. They work faster than a human. And I think if you aim for 9 people, technically it's more, because, as I say, it runs 24/7. But if you aim for 9 people, that's 9 people for £15,000. That's not bad. Most teams would be quite happy to pay that.
And also it's the knock-on effect as well, isn't it? There's less mistakes, there's less redoing of work and stuff like that. So that although the cost is there, it's impossible to put a figure on because of all the knock-on effects and everything. So, but thank you for that, Gary.
No, thank you, Phil, and you're right. The benefits go outside just the robot, because if you've got your team member now that or you, if it's your process, if you're now adding value in ways that you couldn't before, doing the more difficult work, that's very often the biggest benefit is what you're doing with your people rather than what the robots do.
Indeed.
Gary, how many have we got at the moment?
As I say, there's about 11 or 12 that run regularly. And we've, over the period of time we've been doing this, we've stood some up and stood some down. So, for instance, during the pandemic, when we were responding to that, there was some processes that we helped out that were brand new and invented as we went, and they had RPA built into it, but they only ever run a few times. I think discretionary grants was one of those processes.
Cool, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Phil did mention something a second ago, and I'll come back to that about how you can engage with us, and I'll talk you through some of that in a minute. This is kind of our roadmap. So this isn't my slide. This is a good one. So Henry did this. Henry Griffiths. So we started this off in 2019. We started it just a little bit before, actually, when we were part of Service Birmingham. Long story short, Capita novated that the contract across that they picked up with UiPath. So we got a capability and we weren't using it. I approached Henry and said, look, we got this. We should be doing something with it. It could offer a real benefit to the council and for our people. And it grew as a little cottage industry. You can see our roadmap there, how we progressed from a sort of a proof of concept through to where we are now, which is kind of phase 2 going at the moment, where we've got quite an active, quite a healthy pipeline of work to be getting through. We're delivering some real benefits at the moment, and we have a plan to go further and do more. And that's one of the reasons why my developers aren't with me, because they're doing some chatbot training at the moment, so we can put, you know, exploit the capability of that. And yeah, so there's a plan to grow this and to, you know, and to reap the benefits. We have, along with the plan, we do have a healthy pipeline, and we're doing some more work to build that. And if you want to add to it and keep my guys really busy, I'll be more than happy to talk to you. And that's what I say. At the moment, we're doing some chatbot stuff, but in there, there's also the, you know, artificial intelligence and machine learning that gets talked about a lot. But I was talking earlier about talking about unstructured data and how that can slow us down. Well, with a bit of, you know, with an AI model built into it, we could probably automate it as is, and it gives us options to you know, to further automate the things that really get in our way. Document understanding is another one. So, you know, scan documents that we can extract the data from there and use it, you know, it forwards in our processes. So that's kind of the future, and we're dealing with chatbots, as I say, as we speak. And this is my last slide. So how do you get in touch with us? There's an email address at the bottom there, but give me a shout. We've got something called the Automation Hub, which is what we use to manage our pipeline. And I'm happy to take anybody through that. And if anybody wants access to it, to give me a shout. And I think that's it from me. So quite happy to hear any questions or answer any questions.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Hands raised for you. I'll just go through those. So Hannah, do you want to come through?
Hi, Gary. Thanks so much for that. That was really useful. We've just finished a discovery on the bereavement service that Sarita and some colleagues have been involved in. That's part of the customer program, and the sort of initial ask, I suppose, in the customer strategy, which obviously we weren't involved in producing, but has been handed over to the program now. The initial ask was about identifying opportunities to use RPA in the bereavement service, and they've got let's say a large financial sum attached to them in terms of savings. It's a bit of a contentious one, that, so I won't say how much. We've done a discovery. I'm not a technical person. There's some slightly more technically minded people in the team. I'm just trying to understand how we would go from the discovery findings, the insights, you know, what we've heard from citizens, from partners, funeral directors and co and staff, the recommendations we've got a set of user stories for their future tool that they're looking to procure. But I'm just trying to understand how we make the leap from that work to understanding what the opportunities are, especially for people who are kind of non-technical, like myself.
Okay, I'm quite happy for to start that with an informal discussion, and if there is a pipeline of work, and if there is a way we can help, I mean, there's obviously you mentioned funding in the commercial side of this. I'm not dealing with that, but I'm sticking with the technology. But the commercial side, Henry Griffiths can talk you through it. It really is just very cheap. It's just simply buying robotic time. So, you know, if you run the robot for an hour a day, I was talking a robot for £15,000 a year. You're buying an hour a day. It works out at pence in the grand scheme of things. So there is the commercial side of it. I think that's the least of our worries in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, let's have that informal discussion, and I'm happy if you've got then somewhere you do want to progress, we'll feed it in through our pipeline and the Automation Hub. The guys from Digital Doorway are invited to a meeting every Monday, and they can be part of that to help you with that commercial side of things.
Okay, that's really useful. I guess it's good to know that it's a kind of an informal conversation to go from where we are now to moving that forward, if indeed there even are opportunities, because I'm not sure there specifically are, but you may be able to spot some of the things that we haven't spotted. So brilliant,
But
thank you.
Exactly, and maybe we're doing nothing. So let's have the informal discussion first, and then if we want to move along formally, we can go from there.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Are there any other questions? Just going and check. Thank you. Oh, we've got somebody waving. Bob, do you want to come in?
Hi, I'm Bob Miller. I'm from the Privacy and Information Law team, legal, and I'm afraid I missed most of this because my Wi-Fi went down.
Oh no.
Very sorry. But I would just like to read out something from the GDPR, which may or may not be relevant, and forgive me if it isn't. Article 22 of the GDPR is about automated individual decision-making, including profiling. And paragraph 1 says a data subject shall have the right not to be subject to a decision based solely on automated processing, including profiling, which produces legal effects concerning him or her, or similarly significantly affects him or her. Is that something that,
Yeah, that is something to consider, and that's why at the moment we don't do it. Is the simple answer to that. So none of the robots that we run at the moment make a decision based on, so it's not going to deprive them from any kind of service or anything like that. There's no decision making in there. There's decision on paths to go, but nothing that would, offer our citizens or restrict them from any of our services. We do have one robot that's set up that gathers information for a person to look at later. So that it's the information gathering bit that's painful within that process. When it comes to the decision, a person does that.
So it's not just restricting services. It's not just withholding services from them, Gary. Though it's other decisions, isn't it? That
No, there's no decision. There's no decision made for. The only decision that the robots do make decisions, and they can, but the decisions they're making at the moment is whether to put them in box A or box B. And when I say them, I'm talking. It's not always citizens. Don't forget that we're talking about. So there are no decisions made by a robot at the moment that would affect a person. And you're absolutely right, and that's why we haven't done that. And I think when we get to that stage, and I'm sure we will, we'll be having conversations with people like yourself about how we do that and how we give people the option to opt out. But we're not there yet. So you're absolutely right.
Thanks very much, and thank you.
I'll just come in really quickly there as well. In terms of usage of data as well, each of individual project would be required to do that data impact assessment as well. So obviously outlining what kind of data we're using and the purpose for why we're using it, and that will go through the necessary processes internally as well. But as Gary's alluded to, there's nothing at the moment in terms of that for that. Are there any other questions? There's some conversation between Shiraz and Hannah. Brilliant. If there aren't any further questions, then just to say, so this is a forum that meets every couple of weeks. Just in the comments at the moment, are there any topics or anything that you'd like covered in any future sessions? Because we can, we're quite happy to sort of, put different sessions on depending on things that, we are aware of. But are there any things that you are interested in that you might want covered or that you might want to come and present on, perhaps? If you just want to maybe pop something in the chat function, if you don't want to come online. Yeah.
So Sarita, I think a very useful session and good to put things like this on, and just publicized, like you say, whether people might want to. It's like a show and tell. I found them very useful. So if you may not have any thoughts at the moment on chat, but I'm sure people will email you, or if you continue to reach out there and say, look, what would people want to learn, you know, in a 30-minute session or something. I think it's useful.
Absolutely. I mean, we have got a Teams channel that's set up. So if this is something that everybody's interested in joining, then, you know, do drop me. I'll leave my details in the chat. You know, drop me an email through. We can add you on there, and, you know, we can continue the discussion there. There's also a stream channel that we've set up as well. So we record these sessions and we share those internally as well. So you can watch back on the other sessions as well. What we'll plan to do every sort of 3 months is have almost like a planning session. So, you know, everybody come on board, you know, share your ideas, you know, things that you might want to talk about, and then we sort of plan sort of the next, you know, 3 months ahead. So it is a mixture of internal and external presentations as well. So, you know, things that we're working on internally, and you know, we'll also invite other local authorities and similar organisations, you know, that are on their own digital transformation journeys to come and share their projects and their journeys with us as well. So if there's anything, yeah, you know, I keep saying it, but, you know, we want to really open this up. Any colleagues that you think as well that are should be included in any discussions and things, you know, just forward the invitation onto them as well. But our comms guys, you know, Jill and Jazz, are very good. They'll send communications out every time we've got a session. The next one is planned for the 12th of April, but given that it's Easter holidays, it may not run. So we'll play that one by ear and obviously communicate that out to you as well. Yep, and if there's any questions for Gary afterwards, he's happy to take questions as well. So I'll leave our details in the chat function here. So if there's no more questions, we'll probably conclude there and give you some time back.
Okay. Can I just extend an offer to Bob, because I know we sort of rushed that. So Bob Miller, if you do want to talk about RPA from a GDPR perspective, more than happy to pick that up.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yes, sorry, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Just reach out, mate. I'll speak to you then.
Thanks. Brilliant. Well, on that note then, have some time back, folks, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Rita. Thanks, Gary.
To Gary and all. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Gary.